Today, as we have our discussion, I think we're going to deal with the rational mind of what we can do and the Internet of Things and the emotional minds of how we feel about it. Yep. So I think that's going to be great. So I think, thank you everybody for coming today. It's great to see you all. The Internet of Things is obviously something extremely exciting and interesting that's happening in the technology world. I think probably one of the most exciting things that are happening in our space at the moment. And then I think what we've seen is some great recent advances, but I think the opportunity is still untapped, not really explored yet. There's a lot more to be done. And I think over the next 30 minutes, hopefully we'll be able to go through the opportunities and challenges of that. So to introduce the panel, I think Gadi's been well introduced to the sort of dubbed the master of design. We also have Niall Murphy here, who comes from the CEO and founder of Everything, which is a Internet of Things cloud platform that makes everyday objects smarter. We're also a proud investor of Everything, so I'm very happy to have him here. Niall was also a founder of The Cloud, which is a pan-European Wi-Fi network that he sold to B-Sky-B in 2011, is that right? And then we have Lars here, who is well known as the founder of Zing, but since then he has founded Cinco Capital, but more importantly, he's building 37 probably the most connected homes in Germany, maybe even the world. So I think he's a lot to tell us on what's happening there. Then we have Roman here from Strategy An, where he heads up their comms, communications, telecoms, and media practice. And he also is looking at how technology is transforming businesses. And prior to that, he was a scientist as well in theoretical elementary particle physics, which is a bit of a mouthful, but I managed to do that. And then we have Brady Forrester here, who comes from Highway 1, which is part of PCH, and it's an incubator that's linking entrepreneurs, hardware entrepreneurs, with Chinese manufacturers. And what also Brady has done is started the Ignite event as well, which has been really successful and has gone global with, you're now in 100 cities, is that right?
Oh, well over 200 at this point.
Okay, so growing fast. So let's move quickly along. As we know, in the hardware cycles and consumer electronics move really, really fast. One day you're pleased as punch with your wearable, and the next, you've got it in your bottom drawer and you're not using it. The reason is it has to be compelling. You need to stick with it. And connected devices are nothing if there's no real service associated with it. So maybe I start the first question to you, Brady. How do you look at connected devices and how are they innovating enough at the service layer? I'm thinking about August, creates locks, but what is it doing with the locks beyond?
Yeah, so I think what we're in is the first era of Internet of Things. Right now, I take an object that's already in my home and I connect it. However, August is still probably in the tens of thousands, maybe up to 100 of thousands users. They're not at a scale where they can start to innovate based on a platform. And that's what's missing from Internet of Things. It's that scale that comes. And we didn't see that. Foursquare is not interesting if none of my friends are on there. Narrative isn't interesting when it's just one photo being taken, within a town every 30 seconds. It's when things get to scale that we'll start to see Internet of Things really bloom.
Great. So the Internet of Things also relies heavily, its products and services rely heavily on collecting lots of huge amounts of data and information that usually are highly sensitive, right? That users feel a little bit uncomfortable with. And for example, Walmart, I got a number here that they produce 2.5 petabytes of data every hour from their customer transactions. And Lars, I was just thinking, this is obviously a really important theme, and I'm just wondering, are consumers comfortable with companies holding on to this large sum of data that's so sensitive? And are they secure?
I think everything what is in the cloud is more secure than offline. especially when it comes then to a smart home environment. And you have the choice between a smart door and a key, then I definitely would always prefer the smart phone, which is then connected to the door and opens me, because I have actually double security. The key doesn't have a name, everybody can use it, but the phone always has this kind of second layer of certification. So when it comes to things which are really sensitive, like our home, I would be happy to actually give the people living inside more information about their living. The flat right now is a pretty dumb environment. The flat doesn't know if you're at home or away, and you store this basically in the cloud. And I strongly believe that this is more secure than anything else.
Sure. If I may add to that perspective and the question, that's highly relevant. I mean, when we go out, ask people, consumers, but also enterprises, they tell us we have concerns. That might be in particular strong here in Germany, but across Europe you see that a lot. And there's a difference between reality and perception. You know, people really believe everything they enjoy, which is software-based, can be attacked by hackers. And you read that every day in the newspaper. There was a survey which I remember, which was published here in Germany about the German Mittelstand, the famous German SMEs, small medium enterprises. They do not want to digitize their processes. They do not want to use cloud, be it public cloud, private cloud, simply because they do not understand what's happening out there. And everything you're saying is right, Lars, but there's a need for education, for training, and for really making an effort to demonstrate that this is more secure than offline technologies.
One part is this kind of more secure, the other one is the ease of use. So if you enter the home and immediately the light is on, and you don't have to find the light switch, you definitely don't have a problem if this data comes from the cloud with geofencing or something like this. So it's always ease of use versus perception, what you're saying.
But you work a lot, Roman, as well with corporates. You know, are they doing enough? And are also the tech companies doing enough?
Well, I would say it's just kicking off now. I mean, for sure, so far, little has happened. If we want to put it a bit black and white, we could argue IoT or the digital revolution was basically a consumer-driven revolution, right? Benefiting consumer use cases, consumer customer journeys. I do believe there is a huge need, actually, that enterprises pick it up more systematically, and I'm confident that they do so. We just run a survey and asked enterprises, so what are your plans? And I was really amazed by the investment plans that you have. I mean, it really adds up, just in Germany, for 140 billion euros per year, so annually. If you scale it, in Europe, we're talking about 250, 300 billion, which will be invested into, well, everything that's related to a digital enterprise, IoT, cloud services, data analytics. It'll take time, right? It will take some time before we really see the impact, but I firmly believe it's needed, and it's actually a chance, if you may allow me that statement, a chance for the European industry. We have lost the battle for the digital internet with respect to consumers. So digital enterprise, still something to own for the Europeans, I would argue.
Sure, go ahead.
I think there's a fascinating value trade tension in this. I mean, at a macro level, there hasn't been a slowdown in the per capita growth, if you like, of personal data sharing, despite the disclosures of the last couple of years. But at an individual brand, product brand level, there's a key competence that organizations or product manufacturers have to develop in how they earn trust, demonstrate trust in managing the personal data of their customers. They won't be able to deliver a personally optimized product if they can't acquire personal data from the consumer. They won't get the personal data from the consumer if they can't demonstrate the value that they're providing in exchange and the trustability of their brand as a custodian of that data in exchange. So that I think this becomes a competitive competence, effectively, in this world of the Internet of Things, is how good you are at demonstrating the value of personalization and your custodianship of personal data.
But I also think it's an unprecedented amount of data that people are getting about people's daily lives, right? And we saw how last week BMW sort of said that it was not going to share its information that it's collecting, I think, every second on on the drivers, to tech companies, and because of its implications. I was just thinking, Gadi, this is something you deal with, and I'm just thinking, can we do a better job at getting people comfortable with machine automation? Is there more we can do?
I think there's a ton of we could do. I think we just spoke about data for 10 minutes. And this is part of the fundamental problem with the industry. Data is obviously essential to create the utilitarian value of any offering on the Internet of Things. The problem, though, is that if you cannot create an upswell of excitement and connection and trust between the end users, which are us, regular people, you will have major difficulties in implementing all that. And more than that, I think a little bit more fundamental to that issue of gathering data is what kind of data? What is the context? I mean, currently we're gobbling data endlessly, but most of it is without any real meaningful, useful context. So I think there should be some kind of a rebalancing act here where more human values are injected into this data machine, and also it will allow the data machine to be more optimized.
Again, I think that a very interesting perspective. I also read about BMWs Perspective, with respect to sharing data and using data. I find it always appalling almost to see that we talk about data privacy and what it means to have data security rather than talk about the benefits coming out of the data first. Yep. The connected car discussion is a very good one, actually, because we are just at the beginning of what we mean, what we can do with a connected car. But it's so obvious that the benefits, when we talk about traffic management, congestion avoidance, any kind of additional services with respect to car security, safety, are so tremendous that this will really put privacy concerns into perspective. Of course, we should have privacy concerns, but we should also think about what's the trade-off? What do we get out of it? And I'm pretty sure, actually, that many of the mass car manufacturers, they will jump on technology companies and offer that to them, their data they produce in the car, because they don't have the capabilities, and they know that consumers are less concerned. They are interested in the use case. So we're going to see it. I'm pretty sure we're going to see a kind of open car, hopefully on a secure basis.
The problem with mobility is actually we tend to forget that people love their cars. So the issue is, how do you inject love into this whole equation? I mean, there are a lot of discussions about benefits and so on, and I totally agree with you. But at the end of the day, people buy cars because of some aspirational values, because of this moment alone on the road, driving, the engine revving, and so on. So we shouldn't forget that. And I think the more we inject these type of values, the emotional values, into the discussion, I think it will be a lot easier to deploy a lot of beneficial technologies.
From extending the sort of design concepts into this, we're separating data from the product in this conversation, and I don't think that that's a valid way of framing what a smart product is. Because I think it was Bruce Sterling who coined the expression of a spime, which is a combination of physicality of product, computation, algorithm, and real-time data. So a smart product is the manifestation of all of those components coming together in one thing. I mean, we come from 20th century where you received a product with an instruction manual because you as a human being had to adapt to the behavior of the product. What we're going to expect in the 21st century are products that adapt to our behavior, that don't need an instruction manual because they've got algorithms to have an instruction manual about us, so they can learn about our behavior and adapt to us. And I think that becomes the expectation. But data and a smart product are the same thing. They're intimately linked. Data is the driver of what makes them smart.
And I think it's our phones that are really sharing the most data right now. And I think most people don't think about that data and are really willing to trade that data for the convenience that these services provide. And you see that with Facebook. You saw it early on with Flickr when people started uploading family photos. And so I don't think there's going to be much hesitation at all to put IoT into the home en masse.
Same for the home. you want that the home reacts to you automatically, knows what you do, and maybe you can reconfigure via the smartphone.
But I think we're missing one important perspective. I mean, we'll see more use of data and more IoT pick up, but only on the basis of standardized interfaces. I've actually, again, gone back to the digital enterprise. One of the impediments for enterprise businesses to pick that up is the communication standards are not well defined and are not shared. I mean, that is actually, if you allow me that statement, it's a deficit of our politicians, actually. They have the task to somehow make sure that this is accelerated. In the digital enterprise, it's all about this famous MES, the manufacturing enterprise system, that is in the middle of a digital enterprise and allows really communication in a standardized way. If that is there, then you're going to see a huge pickup.
So that was actually my next question.
Sorry for that.
You managed to, but I mean, what we're seeing is the consumer world. There's a lot of competing efforts to sort of become the consumer platform of choice, right? And it's about joining all the dots in the home of all the devices working under one umbrella. And so that's the lock working with the alarm working with the smart camera or whatever it is. And so Roman, if you carry on that, you know, we have some of the big players out there. You have Apple with HomeKit. You have Google works with Google. Samsung's going to be a horse in this race. You know, how do we get that interoperability? How do we get to standardization?
I mean, typically there are two ways how you get standardization and interoperability. One is you let the market force decide, and in the consumer space, I could even imagine it will happen. I'm not sure whether there is a huge deficit. In the enterprise space, you need standardization buddies that help you with that. And I cannot see that we see the kind of consumer technologies also really prevailing in the enterprise space, because we have other security needs there. That was my statement from before. I do expect politicians to understand how important it is for this digital revolution, for the fourth revolution in mankind, to make that happen. So they really have a mandate. It's Brussels here in Europe. It's the German government to really make sure we have standardized digital communication platforms.
But so you think it really is a government initiative? It has to be driven by government rather than getting companies working together in cooperation and saying, hey, look, guys, we need a sensible solution to this. Everybody's going to benefit. Let's do it. You believe it's a political...
Yeah, that's a fair question. I mean, in the enterprise space, I do believe that the kind of kickstart needs to come via the governments. I don't see that there's enough momentum from the different industry players. Yes.
I think it's going to be driven by consumers and the systems they adopt. Yeah. So Sonos in the US is incredibly popular. Everyone's going to want to work with Sonos. And so Google, Apple, Samsung will allow them into their moats. Products that are less popular, just getting kicked off, will have problems getting into these moats. And I think it'll be the consumers that drive the choices there, though.
For the home, it's very simple. You have three choices. You have, as you mentioned, Apple with HomeKit, Google with Nest. And Nest is doing lots of software efforts now for opening up their APIs. And there's probably Eclipse Smart Home, which is also an open source standard. And
so who did you choose?
I'm stage agnostic right now.
Oh, really?
Trying to be open for everything, because most of the manufacturers I'm working with, like the Miele, the Matix, Mennekes, etc., they all said a few years ago, it's going to be IP. In the German system, we have bus systems like KNX, and they're pretty much dead. Everything goes IP, and with IP, you have different choices. From the hardware manufacturers, I see currently that they want to promote as much as possible. And I think services like cloud services like IFTTT are actually making the difference. Because you want to choose and configure in the smart home aspect what happens when. And IFTTT is the only software system probably everybody can use.
I think that there's actually a sort of a deprioritization going on rather than a real struggle with standards. I mean, we have a phenomenal standard in the web, right? We have a a global digital mashing infrastructure for digital content through the web. And the real effort, in my view, is how to get physical products to participate in that digital ecosystem, to be able to talk web language. We've got fantastic standardization of data exchange protocols with JSON and so forth, and with REST and the like, and the underlying connectivity layers now are rapidly standardizing with protocols like MQTT and CoAP and so on, really coming to the fore. So I think that stack is shaking itself out. In the industrial sphere, we've got some specific semantic issues which are a hurdle, but I think it's important to separate the discussion of standards in an interoperability sense from the battle of the ecosystems. There's no doubt that HomeKit is an ecosystem battle. There's no doubt that that SmartThings with Samsung is an ecosystem battle and so forth. But equally relevant role players in this environment are the retailers, for example. If you're a mid-tier product manufacturer making, say, a light, and you want to sell this to the consumer, and you want it on the shelves in Walmart and Home Depot, you've got to make that light not just interoperate with SmartThings and HomeKit, you've got to make that light interoperate with the CRM systems and the digital service platforms of those retailers. If you can't do that, if you can't make your product operate in those ecosystems, it won't get listed, it won't get sold. And the technical issues of interoperability, I'm less worried about. I think the web provides the commoditization of that, really. I'm more worried about the ability for these commercial ecosystems to talk to each other.
Yeah, I saw that Cisco gave a quote that 2% of the installed industrial equipment is internet enabled. So there's a long way to go, right? Yeah. I don't know if you have. I mean, you're probably. Are you working mostly on the industrial side? You see that's where the big efforts are?
Yeah, well, we're working all over the space, but I mean, basically, we have this ambition of 50 billion connected devices, right, in the year 2020. Not sure who put out that number, Ericsson or Cisco. So, I mean, we're far away from that this will happen. And I mean, it's a mix of many things. The ecosystem is not, the commercial model is not there, that people really pick it up. There are privacy concerns, there are standards missing. We have still not found the kind of perfect clue to really see this speedy development that we urgently need. And the reason why we need it actually is very interesting in my eyes. You know, when you think about the productivity increase we have so far gotten out of the internet, it's actually not as big as we would have thought. It's rather marginal. So the kind of required productivity increase in the way how we work, how we interact, how companies interact with each other, requires really this kind of digital revolution. Otherwise, we can't really compare it a revolution. You know, what we have seen with the electrification was much more of a revolution than what we see today. Hence, we need to see this broad pickup in every process, in every interface that we have, in every industry, be it retail industry, automotive industry, manufacturing industry, process industry, towards the end consumer, of course.
So going back to kind of if this then that, I view that as like a really important glue, but it's something that's designed for techies. Whereas I feel like consumers need more of a conversation. So what I almost want for my house is like Slack, where the different objects can talk with me, I can talk back to them. And over time they get to know me and they know what I want, but I know what they're thinking. And if my lights start acting weird, I can kind of pop in and see where the logic went wrong and correct it. And my family can interact that way. And I was just kind of struck by Stuart upstairs talking about the 400,000 integrations that are sending 3 million messages per day. My home will never reach that scale, but all of our homes will dwarf that. And I could easily see it being something Slack-like.
I think, we're just reflecting on the comments here, there is a great pressure to sort out this thing of Internet of Things very quickly. And I think we need to understand it will take longer than we expect. It's going to be a long, protracted process of organic growth and also building those interoperabilities and so on. And I think we shouldn't expect it to be sorted out within 2-3 years, no matter how big launches of big companies will come, it will take a long time. And we should look at it very much along the lines of what happened with everything that is very personal to us, whether it's fashion, whether it's home furnishing or architecture. We'll have an unbelievable variety, and we'll have our own personal preferences, and the industry will have to adapt, but it will take time, and it's a natural process.
So now I have a question for you. Is it really the Internet of Things? Is it really the, of all things? So just talking about products, should all things be connected?
I guess the clue's in our company name, everything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think eventually, yes. I think, we tend to focus a lot on actually IP level of getting something connected, but this is really about the indexing of all physical things in the world, getting the content, the information about all physical things of the world into a shareable and mashable environment. Because when we do that, if we know, the contents of our garage, even if the contents of the garage isn't actually individually got a radio antenna sticking out of the back of it and tweeting, it becomes leverageable digitally. It becomes transactable. If my lawnmower had a digital identity today, I could share it with my neighborhood. I could establish an ability to actually trade with it. And so that's the environment I think we're headed towards, is a space where, yes, it is the Internet of everything, but it's the web of everything, actually. It's about getting the content from as many physical assets as we can into a shareable environment. And by shareable, that doesn't mean a free, open, unconstrained environment. It means an environment of controllable sharing transaction. And that unlocks a huge amount of content and a huge amount of potential application value.
I don't need all of my objects to be able to tweet, but I might want to know what the supply chain was for each of them. So I'd want to know where this pen came from, how it was made, and be able to trace it back to a digital identity. But do I need it to tweet out that I'm holding it? No. So I think there's going to be different levels of how objects interact with the internet.
And I think there will be tons of different cloud services. They're somehow connected. And you, as a user, must be able to actually reconfigure this to your personal needs. Do you want to have this public? Do you want this private?
So just a question too. Maybe Gadi, you can look at this one. Is the value worth the cost to the user? I mean, I keep thinking about the light bulb, right? The $50 light bulb. Which of course, the prices are going to go down and so on. But just
It's a very interesting question, because currently we are trying to hook everything to the internet, and then the question is, so what? What do you do with it now? Now, in case of lighting, we have a history and culture that actually uses lighting for inducing moods and so on, so possibly yes. But in case of my lost sock that didn't come back from the dryer, I'm not sure I want to know where it is, So again, I think it's just the beginning. We'll have to figure out these balances. And again, as I said earlier about data, the important thing about data is not to get it, it's actually to make sense of it. What is really meaningful for humans out of it.
But I fully share your view. I mean, rather than thinking about how many personal objects need to be connected, again, I would like to really add a new perspective. How do we need to connect the supply chain that you just mentioned? Let's take the retail example. As a consumer, if you really have your smart refrigerator, your smart home, and that tells the retailer what you want to have, this digital supply chain breaks down if this retailer is not connected real time or fast enough with the supplier or with the producer of a good, and then with the suppliers of the ingredients of the good. In order to really get the benefits, the really meaningful benefits for consumer, really making them work, you need a completely connected supply chain backwards, so to say, right? That is the kind of Internet of Things that I believe adds more value than thinking about your sock. Yeah.
Well, and extending that, we pay a big cost in every product we purchase for inefficiency in the supply chain. So the parallel trade inefficiencies of the world cost a huge amount of money. The counterfeiting product costs a huge amount of money, and those costs are packaged back into the product. So if we can get data flowing from a product as it travels through the supply chain, but beyond the conventional point of that stopping, which is at the warehouse, and through its point of consumption and so forth, then we can counteract with those things. We're dealing today with, for example, car parts that are parallel trading their way around the world. Now, getting data flowing back from where they're really going allows one to validate the warranties and cut out inefficiencies in the distribution, and that leads to more efficiently costed product, and that'll translate to value to the consumer, as well as obviously the reducing cost of putting intelligence in the product in the first place.
It sort of comes to my next question. Is there the really unobvious product out there that is actually perfect for the Internet of Things? I think we feel familiar with the fridge type thing, but other things that actually are really unobvious, but you can see that can be very useful to the end user. I don't know.
Well, I guess the not often spoken about, but they make up the vast majority of products in this world, are packaged goods, right? And we don't think of them as becoming part of the Internet of Things, but in terms of volume, that's about 95% of product volume shipped in the world today are packaged goods. And by simply making them trackable and interactable, they can become, for example, points of service delivery for a brand. If I've just run out of soap powder, why can't I ask the soap powder to reorder itself, right? And I can do that with my smartphone. As I was highlighting earlier, if a product's landed in a market, what's its provenance? Is it supposed to be there? Is it authentic? And so forth. And this area of packaged goods is enormous. And then, other daily products. Take, for example, a water faucet, right? You wouldn't think a great deal of excitement in making taps connected products. But there's a massive amount of wastage of water, inefficiency of water usage, and simply being able to monitor that and control that is a massive economic benefit. So I think the boring products are actually where the greatest level of value, and less than necessarily the sexy products.
Well, I believe we have mentioned the most important product that we're going to connect in the future, and that is the car. It's a large product, but if you think about the time consumers spend daily, in the Western world at least, it's in the car, and the connectivity that comes out of a car, and the productivity increase, and all the benefits, that will be the most important benefit we're going to see in the next, hopefully, 5 to 7 years.
The question is only, do we still want to own cars? With Travis
that doesn't matter.
Yesterday?
It can be a shared car, could be an owned car. That's a different concept. But a connected car, who can communicate with other cars, with infrastructure, with shops, that will be the most important.
I think our bodies. I heard of a kind of an art project where people were putting Arduino-controlled nails on women at a salon so they can control lights. So vanity there. I just got a Muse, which is a consumer EEG to help me with meditation. And I think exploring how our bodies can interact with the internet is going to be incredibly powerful going forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I thought that was a very exciting panel, so thank you, everybody.
Thank you.